do. Here we go. Hey everyone, how's it going? It is I, the real Randy Chavez, coming at you today with a podcast with a man that needs no introduction, Alfred Kahn, the one responsible for bringing Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh to the States, the one that made Cabbage Patch as big as he did, and you have a bunch of new ventures now as well. How are you?
Well, thank you very much, Randy. It's great to see you. I want to clarify one thing that I always, when I bought the rights to Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and the other things, I got them worldwide. It wasn't just in the United States. We had the actual rights to do everything outside of Japan. So that was a major, even bigger challenge because we had to localize all the cards. We had to localize all these episodes so that we were in all these multiple languages. So, it was really an incredible feat on the part of our team. And it was really something that I think, made it successful, more successful. Anyway, but as I said, I am, very excited to be here. So, what would you like me to talk about first?
Oh, we have one, I guess, because Pokemon is has been a big part of your life. What do you think about the new TCG game that they just put out online?
Well, I think, look, they have to keep up with what the actual. It's funny you mentioned that because I think it goes to the issue of what I want to discuss about.
Ooh, okay.
This generation, every generation has their own situations. In other words, if you go back in time to my generation, we didn't know anything about digital, very, very little. In terms of whether it was a video game. Video games were very, very specific, and then of course, so as every generation comes on board, new technology, new thoughts evolve. And I think what the Pokemon company has been really good at is trying to keep up with whatever the mentality is of the group that's in. So right now, for instance, you've got I believe the target audience for your show, I believe, is basically from about, kids who can first get on the stream to probably like 45, 50-year-olds. And everything in between is the target audience that we're now addressing. Whereas so my age would be not a target audience you would be addressing. So I think Pokemon Company, which has been very, very, positive about this, is trying to keep up with that particular demo.
I think so too. I'm really excited just to see them in the space. And I know that they're not on blockchain. I know that they're not NFTs, but the fact that you can buy them, you can't sell them yet. It's actually in their terms of agreement that you cannot sell them. You will be able to trade them eventually, but I like that they're making people comfortable with these form of digital collectibles. I think that's really good for the space.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think they realize, and again, the other thing about them, which is incredibly interesting, is that they wait. They don't run in at the first sign of something, right? They're very deliberate, and they plan out what they're going to do, very specifically. Look at, and you think about that, Pokemon Go, of course, was a good example of that. The other side of this too, which is fascinating, they don't do anything they don't own. They own a good portion of Niantic. They have a good percentage of Niantic, and every company that they have, anything they've done, they may start off as a license, but eventually it becomes an ownership position. The card game, of course, all the video games, the toy company, they own, they own the toy company that was before it was sold to Jazzwares. So they really are, very desirous of maintaining ownership and control over the things that they do, and their licenses certainly are, in that regard.
When you talk about whenever they give out the license, eventually they own that. There's one thing that I would like to say. Like originally they had Wizards of the Coast, they had WotC go and print out their cards, and then they just, I think a few years ago, they just bought their own printers and they started, print. I think they printed 13 billion cards last year and like almost 10 billion cards the year before. How do you see them going towards the future, whether it be digital collectibles, whether it be NFTs or just what they're doing now? Is there a need to have NFTs, or is it just, hey, people are clearly, I think there's 13 million downloads of the app. People are clearly okay with them not being on chain.
I think they'll do whatever they think makes the brand more, valuable and more, fundamentally, available. So I think, the NFT space, I would venture to say that as that becomes comes back a little more from where it was, I think you're going to see. I think you're seeing it in a little bit in this particular thing they're doing. But I think eventually, if it's something they feel is going to be material to the benefit of their particular brand, they're going to probably do it. I think the caveat here, though, on Wizards of the Coast, we licensed Wizards of the Coast to do the card game. That was one of the licenses that we did it for kids. That was our biggest revenue stream. that was the one, and so when they decided not to renew Wizards of the Coast, obviously our revenue stream in that particular category was decimated. So but I understand totally why they did it, and I certainly don't blame them for trying to vertically integrate everything that makes sense to them. Yeah. But I think it goes to the issue of a Japanese mentality is command and control. I think every Japanese company I've ever dealt with, especially if they own IP, they want to be very, very specific about how that IP is handled, who the licensees are, what's the advertising, even though they may not be as adroit as what you want, but they do it. And again, in the categories they don't do it, they bring in the best possible people they can. I think the new deal they have on their theatrical releases, is an amazing company. That's something they probably wouldn't do, right? So therefore, that's the reason why they did that. Or if they were going to do if whatever else comes up that where they themselves don't feel they could do a great job, they will bring in the best possible companies that could do that. So we were very lucky that, when I say lucky, we were smart. We got all the rights to everything, and now what they're doing is going after the best possible partners they can get in whatever category they feel is important relative to the success of Pokemon.
Yeah, anything they touch, they dominate. Whether it's video games, it's media, card games, and it's very hard to make a card game. A lot of people really pumped up about MetaZoo the last few years, and then they declared bankruptcy. It's really hard. Anyway, Mr. MC1, shout out to him. Thanks for the super chat, saying, Al, thank you so much for coming to all our VeVe and Gold logo parties in New York City. You're amazing. How how do you feel about his parties? How would you rate them as because you've been partying for quite a long time? Are they?
I'm amazed. I'm really amazed at the community. I really am. I mean, because the community has gone through some peaks and some valleys, et cetera, et cetera. But the community is really incredibly interesting. I mean, and the cross rough of that community. But there was a couple of things that are commonality about that community, which I've thought about a lot, because in my business model, how do I get into that community? What does that community represent, in terms of what they're into, what those groups are into? And I think I've come up with a list of what that particular community, that demo is actually looking for. You follow my point, and what they're interested in. And I think that VeVe is part of that lineup, right? Part of the lineup that they are interested in, because I think there's a number of things that cross rough into that community. So my job would be to how do I get other of those cross roughs that I can evolve into my own businesses. So we've been spending a lot of time looking at not only VeVe, but not VeVe specifically as I'm not trying to do something that would be in competition with VeVe, but looking at the makeup of the community and what are they really into? What are they really into? And I think we've come up with a group of things that I think really demonstrate what that community is really about.
I've compared you to Jerry Bruckheimer before, where any film that he touches just is awesome. It's amazing, paved in gold. And a lot of the stuff that you've done, again, whether getting those licenses for Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Cabbage Patch Kids, it seems that a lot of stuff, you have a really good knack for knowing what the trend is before the trend hits. So when you were in these early discussions with David, at least with David and Dan, as far as VeVe is concerned, how important was it that you were not only have license, you had creative control of over some of the first pieces, or did you just want to like, hey, I know that you guys are going to do what you're going to do, and I just want to be part of it and just own part ownership?
I look. I think the bottom line story is when David first approached me, and I was in Hong Kong. I remember that was kind of weird, and I hadn't seen him in a long time because I had licensed him. You know the story behind David and I, right?
Yeah.
So basically, he told me about this idea he had for a digital collectible universe because everything was going digital. He saw everything going digital. Hi, John. Everything was going to visit. Everything was going that way. So, but the problem was, how do you convince other people that this is a good idea? And of course, how do you get to the right people to make those presentations? And I guess the good news was, I had connections. I mean, I knew everybody that were running these studios, and when I brought them in for the meetings, this was like they didn't know what we were talking about. I mean, they didn't know. They brought their lawyers and they brought their licensing people, and then David and Dan would tell them about what this was going to be about, and and they really realized after, it took a while, of course, that this is where the future could be going in terms of that there was a tremendous number of interests always in physical collectibles. And then the question is, shouldn't that be something that would be transferred to a digital space? And of course, everything in this world eventually gets transferred to some level to a digital space. So I think that was what they sort of saw. And of course, to Dan and David's credit, they really launched something that stuck really quickly. I think that was pretty amazing when you think about the first 2 years. VeVe, it was the drop would be out in seconds. It would be gone, and I think that that's credit to what they did. I think we had good licenses. We were able to use the right characters. We weren't limited to the character group that we wanted to use, and now, as anything else, as things get a little bit older, they have to be reevaluated as to what's the best possible way to go from here. And I think that's what they're in the process of doing.
Agreed. Shout out to Lori Brenner. Says, "Hi, Randy and Al. Miss you guys."
Hey, Lori. How are you? Good to talk to you. Good to see you. I was on the phone with Lori actually prior to this conversation.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Hope it was all good things. Hope it was,
it was all good things.
Very good. Atomic Z06 saying, "Let's go. Digital collecting for the win." Thank you. Thank you. So speaking of knowing trends before they happen, like a Jedi, you have a couple of new ventures that you're doing. Tell us about one of those.
Well, maybe first go through a litany of what we thought, okay? And then I think, and I'm going to list a couple of things. Then I'll pick one thing out of that list, okay?
Okay.
But here's what I think. When I look at this generation, when I look at millennials, which of course I think is the sweet spot of everything we're doing.
Yeah.
And what are they interested in? Well, first and foremost, I mean, digital, whether it be especially crypto, right? And a lot of your constituencies that are interested in VeVe are interested in crypto. There's certainly a connection there. The other connection here is also online gaming. There's a lot of your constituencies are into online gaming. A lot of them also are into sports, and especially sports betting. So that's another one that is really, I think, part of this whole gestalt. Obviously, collectibles, right? And about my story in all this, the last one, which is interesting, is cannabis. That's another vertical that gets into that group. So everything we're doing now falls into one of these categories.
Yeah.
So pick one, and I'll tell you what we're doing. Okay.
I'm very curious about the cannabis one. Okay.
Well, we have a company that I don't own, but I have a piece of, and I'm the marketing head, called VitaPrint. Okay. And VitaPrint is a bottom line company that developed the technology. It took years and years, where they're able to print things that were never able to be printed. Okay. For instance, right now, as an example, we're printing milks. We're printing oat milk. We're printing soy milk. And what they are is basically, instead of coming in a container of milk, it comes on a form factor, which what that form factor is exactly what's in oat milk. Nothing else. No water, no preservatives, pure ingredients. And it's put into an ink. Then it's printed into these discs. And depending on the size of the disc is how big that oat milk container will be. In other words, you can get a quart, you can get a liter, but it's no refrigeration. It doesn't require any storage. And basically, when you get it, you add water to it, right? And it's the best tasting oat milk on the planet. We started launching it in Europe. It is unbelievable how well it's doing. In the States, we're going to be launching, and we have Whole Foods signed up. Because, again, another area of your group is sustainability.
Yes.
People love the sustainability. No packaging, no plastic, no refrigeration. Of course, you have to refrigerate it after. You do it. But now with cannabis, we're actually printing cannabis. We're actually printing the paper, and it's imbued with the THC. We're doing all kinds of things for cannabis companies around the country, especially the Indian reservations who have licenses for cannabis. So in going in production, it'll be in production probably in the next, I would say next 2 or 3 weeks. So that's one of the things that we identified that we felt would be important relative to what we were doing.
So going back to the oat milk here for a second, you said it tastes great, but you have to add water. For me, coming from New York, water tastes one way to me. Then if I go to Arkansas, water does not taste good down there. Ohio, it tastes different. Florida tastes different. So are there instructions or are there things saying like, hey, if you're in New York, add this type of water or add, do you guys do bottled water?
No,
does that affect the taste?
There's nothing, because again, this disc also has a flavor on it. So it's a multi-layered disc. So it actually overrides whatever the water might be. Of course, if the water is contaminated, I'm not sure about that. But as far as we've had taste tests done with thousands of people, and they basically think this is the best tasting oat milk they've ever had. We did it. We did a 1,000-person blind test in Germany. It won every time. But here's the other part of it, which is so fascinating. A liter of oat milk, or a container of oat milk, costs about $3-4. It costs about $3 to actually make it. Our cost is 52 cents.
That's amazing. So the margins on that must be insane.
Yeah, the market's insane. And again, think about countries where there isn't refrigeration. In Africa, where people are starving. We're with the UN now to develop plants in Africa where we can deliver not only oat milk, we can deliver soups, we can deliver all kinds of things. All the major corporations have approached us about doing things for them. I mean, I can't go into them because we're under non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
But you name it, where they're asking us to figure out how to make a form factor that would take their containers away and let them build something that's really sustainable.
Yeah, that fattens the margins. That could actually, even if you could do two things, you could lower the margins a little bit, but then make the prices cheaper. They could undercut the competition. And then, I mean, I'm not saying you guys solve world hunger or anything, but you could definitely get the amount of people in absolute poverty down to a minimum. That's fantastic.
In print, I'm amazed every day when I go into the office and we talk about other things that we could do. There's like 60 or 70 verticals that we could attack, but of course you only can do certain things at one time. So the first two things we did, we started printing. We started to go with initially we did vitamins for a company called Thorne, which is one of the largest vitamin companies in the world. So instead of tablets, we printed the vitamin vitamin D is a vitamin D form factor. And all you do is drop it in juice or water, et cetera, and you had your vitamins. And of course, it came in a little piece of paper. It didn't come in any kind of a bottle, or it didn't come in any kind of a can. It wasn't a tablet. And a lot of people don't like tablets. They can't swallow them. But it's also much cheaper. And it doesn't require, when you bake a tablet of anything, it's on a press, right? And the press has to be cleaned crazily because there's powder residue from one to the other. With this, it's an ink. It wipes right off. And then you can go from one vitamin or one product to another on the same press. And it's a 2D press. It's not a 3D press. So it's not a 3D pressing. It's a 2D press. So we are now manufacturing our own presses that have special heads that with our patents that we can supply to licensees around the world.
Okay. I have so I just texted one of my partners. One of the people that sponsors the channel is a company called Mudo. They have I have their test right here. I just took. It's an epigenetics test, and they determine what you're deficient in. They can determine what, but they have supplements that they sell. And if you guys have it where you can cut costs, I just texted them like I'll set up a meeting. I'll introduce you guys, because if you guys can work together, they could buy some of your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly, love to see it, love to talk about it. We're in an investment. We're in an investment round. Everything we're talking about right now, we're in a investment round. You follow my point? Because
Yeah.
raise the monies for these things, and we're knock on wood. We're getting there. And I don't really, it's funny. I want to change my business model a little bit in terms of some of the things we're doing. I don't want licensees. I want partners.
Yeah.
I want partners because I am so concerned about how the licensing business is going. Where you look at Marvel and you look at obviously Mattel, all they do is raise the royalty rates, right? And all they do is then create more of a problem for the manufacturers because their margins are shrinking. I was talking to a toy company the other day, I won't tell you which one. They'd say, we'd love to get out of the toy business. The margins are so small, especially on all these collectibles, especially on all the action figures. When you have, what's Marvel charging now? What's Disney charging now? They're charging a lot. So the idea of trying to create margins for people, and also have licensees that become actual financial partners, we're not going to hose them, in terms of our licenses. We give them a way to make money because they're a partner.
Yeah.
So we want them to make money because the more money they make, the more money we make. So I want to change the model for how companies work with IP companies, and also how they work with ideas, so that there is a more generalized desire for everybody to do well, not just the licensor.
So you have one of the other things I guess we'll go over is I don't know if I could say, I'm sure I could say who to deal with. I'll let you say that is comic books, old school comic books. And I'll get into the VeVe and Marvel stuff in a second, but we have the Cat token here where I'm writing a comic for them as well. How are you selling those? What is that business like? And what are the qualifications to go and get in business with you guys if we have certain comics to sell?
Okay, so first of all, we've developed a incredible group of people who know where all the comic books are.
Mm-hmm.
They know where the big collectors are. So the first group we got was 1.5 million comics from collectors in Brooklyn. Believe it or not, been collecting for probably 60 years. I've never sold one comic, and their comics all go back from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Well, that's the first group that we're putting on. We made a deal with eBay. We're now in eBay. We launched our new company at Comic-Con, and it's called Constellation, and it's where stars come together. So it's KAHN Stellations, and we put up our first group of comic books on eBay on this Constellation's website, and we did very, very well. And that now we're going to be adding more and more and more and more. Well, we're going to be selling series. These people have series of, let's say, I don't remember offhand. I think the Hulk, there were 75 comics of Hulk. I'm not sure. We have them all. They're all there. They're going to go up at one time. Whoever wants to buy the exact complete set of Hulk, they will certainly be the price individually, but that'll be the first time you'll see that probably in one group at one time. But we're also looking at all kinds of things. We're looking at on the Constellations, there will be all kinds of collectibles that are really different and are really important, but also that people can buy them. They're not, they can get them at a reasonable. Not some of them aren't very cheap, but the bottom line here is we want to be the Walmart of collectibles. I want to be in all the categories. I don't want to be in NFTs. I want to compete, but I want to be in things that are physical, and I want to be in things that people would really find exciting for their collection, and that comic books are the first step of that.
I agree. And there's some people that might say, well, you have a bunch of digital media that's happening where Sports Illustrated doesn't hand out their physical magazine anymore, and what's that called? Encyclopedia Britannica doesn't print out physical copies. But this isn't new stuff that you're doing. This is stuff, you said it going 80 years ago, going back to the 40s. What is the most recent generation of comics that you have? Do you have stuff from the 90s? Do you have stuff from the 80s? Or is it specifically all 50 plus?
This one group we started with are older. They're older from the golden and silver ages of comics. These guys have been collecting forever. Matter of fact, most of these have never been opened. When they bought them, they never took them out of whatever the wrapper was that they got them in. I mean, it's insane. And, but there's a huge number of them. Hi, Mo. There's a huge number of them. And, we also now have a group working with us that are actually out scouring the world for more collections and have been doing this for a long time. We have comic art that's going to go up on this. We have also manga that's going to go up on this.
Yes.
Because I believe strongly in anime and manga, as you know. We're also looking at video game collections. We're looking at VHS collections, and again, what we do, which no one else does, we don't rape and pillage the people that own them. We give them we give them a better deal than they can get from other potential from more traditional sellers, right?
Yes. So that's great to see. And I do want your opinion on this as well. I mentioned VeVe Comics, where Marvel goes in and they say, hey, VeVe, here's kind of the keys to our store. Every single new comic that we have that hits the shelves every Wednesday, you guys can sell on your website. And it's not called Marvel Comics. It's called VeVe Comics. How important is that? How big of an asset is that to the VeVe company?
Yeah, I think it could be huge. I mean, look, the number one comic book supplier. I think they're bigger than DC. I don't know, but
I think so.
But I think that look, what VeVe is trying to determine is what's the best way to inculcate their business. And basically, comics are incredible how people collect comic books. I'm shocked, frankly, all those things, but. So the idea that it gives them so basically they become a distributor for Marvel, right? So instead of all the newsstands, which would probably in most cases don't exist, they now have the Marvel has an outlet where those comics can be sold online the day after they put it out, onto their own baseline. And and I think again, if VeVe can continue to grow and show their point of difference in terms of what they're doing. And the more valuable the VeVe trademark becomes, the more valuable that they become as an entity. So I think it's important. I think it's something it's like if you were a Chevrolet dealer and you were the only guy selling Chevrolets, that wouldn't be bad, right? So it's that kind of, I think it's that kind of a situation.
That's great. So we'll get a little bit more into that in a second. But Mr. MC1 says, I'll shout out the super chat saying, Al, can you please share with us the history of your association with Cabbage Patch dolls, how you got your own doll, and how it all came to be?
It's a long story, but a quick story. I was running the toy division at Coleco. Okay, and when I was at Coleco, I decided two things. They had to get into the video games, the handheld games. This is going back in the 80s, right? We started seeing the stuff coming in from seeing the coin-ops coming in from Japan, right? So at that time, I make it a tablet to read every newspaper I can get my hands on. I do it to this day. I read all of them. I'm not reading the political, I'm reading what's going on. Sometimes you see a little story. And I saw a story, 1982 in the Wall Street Journal about this artist in Cleveland, Georgia, who was making these soft sculptured dolls called Little People from Babyland General Hospital. And he was adopting them out. And he had opened taken an old birth, like an old doctor's office, and turned it into Babyland General Hospital in Cleveland, Georgia. That's the middle of nowhere. And it had been picked up as one of the places that had become pretty popular in a very specific way. You follow? Yeah. So I called them and I said, can I come down to see it? And I flew down to Cleveland, Georgia, which is like 2.5 hours outside of Atlanta. And they had this incredible setup. It's like, it almost reminded me of like a Disney ride. In other words, when you have a Disney ride, you go on the ride, the next one was a gift shop, right? So love this ride, and I buy the gift. Well, they had this whole setup where these babies, they called them babies. They didn't call them dolls. Well, these babies were basically, in different environments. They were in school. They were in this and that, and they were born in a Cabbage Patch. Because in the Cleveland birth registry, I'm sorry, the Georgia birthing law, their fantasy was that babies come from cabbages. So when I saw that, I went, wow, these are Cabbage Patch Kids, and the question was, how do you replicate that? Because I saw people, they were laying down $150 in 1983 for these things.
Damn.
Right, you follow? So bottom line story is, I bought the rights to make those dolls for Coleco, and it was a slog. It was a real slog, because how do you promote it? How do you get people to understand it? We didn't have internets at that time. We didn't have a lot of stuff. And imagine going to the retailers and saying to the retailers, they're one of a kind. And we did a lot of disaster checks with consumers, though. I do that all the time. I talk to the consumers. I don't ask them if they like something. I ask them if they hate it, because if they like it, doesn't mean they're going to buy it. But if they hate it, we know they're not going to buy it. So, and they all thought the idea was pretty interesting, that these babies were one of a kind, and that became our benchmark. They're one of a kind. They're a Cabbage Patch Kid. There's nobody else like me. We went on all these campaigns. I did. If you remember that? Remember those years, Reverend Sun Young Moon? Remember those mass weddings that he did? You got too young for that one.
Yeah, I don't recall.
We decided to do mass adoptions in every city. We invited kids coming to parks, and we gave out the Cabbage Patch Kids and made them take the oath. Did mass adoptions, got picked up in all the newspapers, and and that was just started to do it, and we started to build this equity in this basis. And I remember I rented the windows at Macy's in New York, and this was in June of '83. And we took the Cabbage Patch Kid. We changed the name to Cabbage Patch Kids. It wasn't necessarily our idea. But we saw it. Obviously, it made sense for us because it was a cabbage, right? And then, how do you make these things one of a kind? No one had ever made anything one of a kind. And we had these incredible designers who were figuring out how many heads they had to put in every day, change the head molds every day, change the eyebrow, change everything, so that theoretically every doll that came off the line would be a one of a kind. That was what people thought was really great. Well, there is a documentary out on the $1 Billion Babies, it's my story on it, and it goes through the story about what happened in more detail. And it was crazy. It was crazy. I'll tell you the funniest part about this, though. So, we get the Macy's windows set up to look like Babyland General Hospital.
Yeah.
But Macy's buyer said, are you going to promote this on television? I went, no, we're not. We're going to let you run an ad. In those days, they'd run an ad in the Sunday Times, and they'd get mail order. They get phone calls, right? So bottom line story is, they what I was doing was running the hell out of television in New York. But I didn't tell them, because if I felt if it failed, I could say I didn't run any televisions. So I was concerned about this. So the bottom line is that we ran these ads ad nauseum. And then that Sunday morning, we shipped $5,000 into Macy's, which is insane. And that Sunday morning, they ran an ad in the New York Times, which was like a phone-in ad. So I get a call Monday morning. We sold out every piece that we had. We took 4,000 rain checks. And I went, ooh, what's happening now? Well, that started a craziest thing, because everybody wanted one. We couldn't make them fast enough. And I was getting phone calls every day in the office from people, Al, I went to high school with you. I need a Cabbage Patch Kid. Somebody called and go, my daughter's dying of cancer. Well, I had a rule. If anybody called up and said they have a daughter or a kid that was dying or had a problem, get the address, send them a doll.
No.
One day, my secretary goes, Nancy Reagan's on the line for you. Of course, I want to take a message, right? So at the end of the day, I'm looking at the the mail, and it was a Washington D.C. number, and I went, could it possibly be Nancy Reagan? Called her up. It was Nancy Reagan. She needed 2 Cabbage Patch Kids, and I said, okay, I'll send them to you in one condition, that I want to meet your husband. Well, I'll show you what happened. I got a call about 2 weeks later from from the White House, and there I am with Ronald. But that started a whole conversation, and we did this big promotion with Space and on Cabbage Patch Kids. So it was the craziest thing, and it's something that it's hard to fathom how we sold $100 million over a period of time. It was the craziest thing.
That is so. Obviously, you have on one end, Marvel go into VeVe, say like, "Hey, throw all of our stuff into VeVe Comics and this website, sell things digitally." And that is the trend where even kids on like Fortnite, kids on Minecraft, they get all these skins. But one of the things that was most successful recently, VeVe just did a collab with FigPin. And it was a double combination because it wasn't just with FigPin, but it was with KFC as well. And it sold out, I think, within like 26 hours on like the second day of Comic-Con. Because they're clearly able to go and do phigitals with Funko, with FigPin, what are some other physical ones that you think would be able to go well with VeVe? Could you bring back Cabbage Patch Kids in this way?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because you're talking 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. 40 years ago. I kill myself. I mean, so the bottom line story is, I think there's a lot of things that they could do.
Yeah.
In the physical space, I really think there's a lot of things they can do. But they also have to understand that they have to do some things that are really unique to them.
Yeah.
What I have found in my business model is that if you don't have the point of difference, it's a problem. So what I would recommend to them, if they want to do more of the physical product, is they have to make sure that the physical product is unique, is special. And I think I was on the phone with Fig Pens, actually. We were talking about what before you.
Yeah.
You know that, right? So he's flying into New York. Actually, we're gonna have a long conversation about that, about what I think they might want to do in terms of VeVe, in terms of more digital collectibles, in terms of what else they could do to make that blow that up. You follow? But I think if VeVe does that, and if VeVe does more of the digital, not digital, I'm sorry, the physical combination, the world is your oyster. The beautiful thing here is that most collectibles, and I'm making a comment only, what is one Batman figure that's made by Hasbro different from a Batman figure that's made by somebody else, and yet they charge a certain amount of money for that figure because it's blue or it's red. I don't understand that. I don't get it. I don't know why people go out and spend that money, but I do understand if you have it a point of difference, and maybe something about that figure is really unique that only VeVe has, or only that only is available through that, or something that maybe is a brand new category or a brand new substance. I think there's a lot of ways. You got to be clever and you got to think about it, and that if you do it, you could get really significant success. So I applaud VeVe's what they're doing in the comics, and I think that's a bottom line story is really really amazing.
There's every single girl that I know in my life, doesn't matter if they're my friend's kid and they're 10 or they're older and they're like, they love Squishmallows. Mm-hmm. And that Jeremy Padower's company, the Jazzwares, they make that. And even myself, I feel like it's a lot of my generation, but if I see Pikachu, oh, I need him. But then Pikachu in a red hat, oh, I need that too. Like, just I don't know what it is. I don't know why we want that, but we do. Shout out to Dr. Strange saying Al knows us well. He's making his FanDuel lineups right now. Is that something that you could see VeVe getting into, any type of gambling, any type of saying like, hey, we're going to have AI in our VeVe verse, in this metaverse, and you could gamble on which collectible is fastest, which collectible is strongest?
I'll give you my. I won't tell you what it is.
Okay.
One of my new properties is tied directly to gambling, and it's tied directly to, because it's got multiple layers of entry. Right. We have an entry for kids 7 years old. and then we have entry for everybody in your age demography. So it is, we have a tremendous, I think, idea. We've sold it into all the casinos, and the betting is going on with it. It is, you can really see how this is going to float, because again, you need multiple verticals to attack. The one thing that we have to realize about intellectual property, you have to have multiple verticals, so that you have, for instance, with Pokemon, they've got a card game, they've got this, they've got that, they got this, they got that. What's new in intellectual property? But what's new, which is certainly what's the biggest thing right now in intellectual property in the world? Two things, besides Pokemon: sports and anime. We've combined those two.
Ooh.
We've combined those two, and and the anime production is going in production now, and the sports model is already up and running. We have some tests going on, and so I think what we're trying to do is combine what we know, get a large demography, right?
Yeah.
And I think this thing is really cool. The story is cool. The characters are cool. And of course, again, it's got a duality. It's got a live action piece, which you can gamble on. And it's got a fantasy piece, which you can collect.
Oh, best of both. Am I Miley Cyrus in 2009? Because that is the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned
something. Yeah.
You mentioned FigPin before, so I will announce here that FigPin is officially sponsoring the channel. We will have a giveaway at least once a month. We'll do more than that. So.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with him today, and I think those are the kind of partners that VeVe needs. You follow?
Yes.
So that when VeVe does something, it's not everywhere. It's with them. At least there's a window, and I think that's what I think. I think David and Dan should do more of that. Get companies who have an interesting product, right? And I like their product, and do things that would be commensurate with what Dan and David need to do in terms of getting VeVe where it should be in terms of the marketplace.
Agreed. And maybe we get them fig pins or not, but Lori Brenner says, I would love to buy a VeVe Phygital Cabbage Patch doll /NFT. She's not the only one that said that. We've had Truck and Hank. We've had a bunch of people. Some of the greatest things that have had the biggest price points, especially for special mint numbers, have been stuff from the 80s. You've had the RoboCop. I think one of the special mints from that sold for like $6,000. You've had Boba Fett, one of the bounty hunters over from Star Wars. So you have a bunch of these people that they're hungry for it. And am I going to say you're going to sell 10,000 of these? That might be a little much for right now, but could you sell a couple thousand? I think so, pretty easily.
Look, I must tell you, I've had conversations with Xavier on this for years. For years, he is, he's an interesting guy. He's loaded. The new Babyland General in Georgia is on 1,000 acres. 1,000 acres. He's turning it into a whole city of a resort, and it's called Babyland Hospital. So, he and I have had these. I've flown down there. I don't know how many times. We've had these conversations. He's just not sure. I guess he's concerned about, does the NFT, take away from the original of the actual live position, right? Yeah. So I don't know, but I'll show you something.
Okay. I love this game. Yes, Smash Brothers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Absolutely love that as well.
So this is my Cabbage Patch Kid that he made for me in 1983. You follow my point? So this one, I was a redhead. I'm not a redhead anymore. But the bottom line story is, I've been trying with him. I call him every once in a while, and I said, Xavier, what do you think? And the problem is he doesn't need the money. He's really, and he has this very, very, he's the ultimate collectible. I mean, these people buy these things, and the prices that they get now at the store, there are dolls that go for $1,500. So he is, he has really got that. So I would love to see people do something with that on the NFT side. But so far it's been a real slog. It hasn't. He hasn't. But I'm going to give him a call again and say, look, we just had this conversation, and I think there's a lot of interest in it, and especially with VeVe, and maybe we can get him to do something. I think he's it'll be. We'll see. I don't know if I can do it.
There's I forget the name of the band, but they have a lyric in the middle of the song that says, "I'm getting old and I need something to rely on." I feel like a lot of the people in VeVe, in my analytics, it shows most people are between the ages of 25 and 54. So some of them are younger, but some of them are also in that kind of middle-aged group, and maybe their kids are leaving the house. And this is something that I've had people say that they're not that they hated their family or anything, but this is something that like they do together. They'll like watch me do the drops and stuff, and not all of them are in their 20s or 30s. Some of them, again, in those 40s, 50s plus. I really think they would do well. So tell them we're all about it. Tell them it'll be fun for people, and it'll spread a lot of happiness that way.
Something I get more, when I meet people and they talk about how I was, helped them with, their childhood. I'm going, oh shit, am I old? So, but the bottom line story is, it's interesting. They talk about, not only talk about Cabbage Patch Kids, they talk about Ninja Turtles, they talk about Polly Pocket, they talk about World Wrestling Federation, all the things that we did, and that, there's really, there is this nostalgia. There is this nostalgia. And certainly that's what drives, Marvel and Disney and, these companies as well, because of the things that were done, 40, 50, 60 years ago. But by the same token, you need a new thing. You need a new thing. And you need a new thing because ultimately the world moves on. And the point of all this is timing. So it's when the timing, I think there's an interesting thing that the most important thing about launching something is the timing, is the universe ready for this? And that's why we do disaster checks, to find out. Because I had some ideas that I thought were so great. How could they miss? And I took them to a disaster check, and they told me I was out of my mind. Even those,
what were some of those?
Well, one of those, which was that I wanted to do a fashion doll version of Cabbage Patch Kids.
Okay.
Well, what I did was I wanted to make like I remember I called it it was a high school class. They looked like real kids, right? But there were a whole broad of them. So way before my time, there were beautiful cheerleaders, there were football players, but there were also kids in wheelchairs. There were also kids who were wearing braces. And and I showed that to groups, and they went, we only want blonde, blue-eyed girls at that time. Now, looking at Mattel and Barbie, all those things that what I thought about then were there. But at that time, they told me I was out of my mind. They would never buy a baby in a wheelchair. They do it now. Do it now. So that was one of my, was the things that I felt was really, pretty, a good idea. I loved the idea, and of course, it didn't fly. It didn't fly in any way, shape, or form. But there again, like I said, everything else about this is the fact that you have to know who your target audience is. You have to understand what they're really doing, and then you have to try and figure out a way how to get them involved into what you're trying to market, right? So I think when you talk about the age demography, I have the age demography actually. I have it. I told you from 44 to 59 is the oldest group. And then I have 12 to 27, 28 to 43. So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
We're on the same exact page. And, if you could bring things back that have that, that people really feel good about, because those times, it's like everything else. Those times seem to be better than they are now for some reason. Even though we have, I think so many new products, but it was a simpler time. It was a simpler time. There was a lot of things going on in that time that were, of course, horrible. The Vietnam War certainly was horrible. But I think today it's a convoluted world. It's a tough world. It's a lot of things going on that that people would like to have a little bit of relaxation and maybe bring back some of that material that they've really loved. That's why I think like we're bringing back something called Sport Magazine. You ever hear of this?
Yeah, back in the day, yeah.
I just got the rights to Sport Magazine. They've got 400,000 pictures in their archives. It goes back. They started in the 40s, and I think they went to the 90s. They were the precursor of Sports Illustrated. It's not the same company. But we've gotten those rights. So we're going to make collectibles out of that stuff. So the idea is that, that's where you see all these. Like I used to represent the Negro Leagues, believe it or not. I thought that would be something that I would try to do that to help them at that time.
Yeah.
The Negro Leagues had gotten screwed. The people that were in the Negro Leagues couldn't go into Major League Baseball. But how many of them, became, incredibly popular, but yet they never able to cash out because no one ever took care of them. So we tried to do that. And now, the Negro League records have been tied into Major League Baseball. So the number one player of all time turned out to be a Negro League player. So I think there's just a lot of that you could probably look at.
Yeah. So did they also have a swimsuit edition, the same as Sports Illustrated did?
I don't know. I have to go. We're looking through all their archives. I don't really know.
That will take a while.
I think I just don't know, so I'm not going to comment on it. But I must tell you, the Sports Illustrated edition for Sports Illustrated, it's interesting how that's juxtapositioned over time, but it's still pretty fun. I must tell you, I like it. What's not to like, right?
Especially when nowadays there's newer sports, like on ESPN, you have the World Series of Poker. You have these new sports that I guess gaming's on there as well. So I guess when you bring back some of the old, are you going to mix back some of the new with that? Are you going to get some people that play Dota and put them on the cover?
I think. Look, the sports thing is just. I'm telling you, there's so much money out there for people to want to invest in new sports. There's so much money that people family offices, the people that own all these teams. I've met with a number of them. I've met with the owners of the Boston Celtics. I've met with the owners of the Kansas City Chiefs. They're looking for investments in exactly what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Can you follow? Now, it doesn't mean we haven't closed them. We're still trying to close them. But sports. There's look. Pickleball is even a sport now, right?
I love that game.
Yeah, pickleball, and people, it's incredible. The professional pickleball league. It's on television. It's really it looks like a lot of fun. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity. Look at women's basketball. What happened to that? That was
Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, look what happened to that one. Women's basketball, up until recently was a naysayer. Now it's getting more, viewership in some cases than the obviously NBA, which is interesting. Yeah. So there's the sports thing, the gambling thing is really, driving valuations on sports, and of course television rights, which are outrageously high because people want to see live events. That's the other side of it, live events, because the networks usually were doing these, series that were basically, taped series. Their ratings have gone down, but when you look at when they put on a basketball game or a football game or World Series, what happens to their ratings? They go right through the roof. So that's why Amazon and Netflix and all these other guys are trying to get rights, because they see that with those rights, they drive new people to their network, as well.
Agreed. So I know I don't have it till 7, so we'll do this giveaway from VeVe right now. And the giveaway is just going to be an answer to my question. Whoever I see is the first person to answer will win a VeVe giveaway. And the question will be, what year was Al Kahn born in? And whoever goes and post that, then they will win the giveaway. And again, it's the first person who I see. And it will be, I don't know what the giveaway is. Obviously, it's going to be a VeVe collectible, whether it's a comic or a new collectible. And Sandbox got it. Thank you, Sandbox. Go in and shoot me a message, and then I'll connect you with VeVe.
Thank you, Sandbox.
Sandbox new. So there's, like I said, we have a couple minutes here. I do want to talk to you off camera for a bit. I know you have a very tight schedule. Shout out to your wife that's coming on the podcast. She'll be on over on Wednesday. And I think you have a meeting that day with another buddy of mine. We won't say his name, but but yeah. Anything you want to go over before we end it here?
I just want everybody to know that we're in a very exciting time, and that what we always should be looking at is not only what we like to do, but how are we helping people? Yeah. There's a lot of people that need your help. That's why I have the foundation I have, which my wife will talk about. But we also never forget. Now, one thing I love about the community, they've embraced us. They've embraced the foundation, the First Responders Children's Foundation, and that we had an auction they did for us. One of your most stalwart, I won't tell you who it is yet because we haven't gone through the paperwork, is going to join the board of the First Responders Children's Foundation. One of your real major players in VeVe is going to join the board. So
it's fantastic.
So the bottom line story is, just remember, be thankful for what you have, but also don't forget people who don't have what you have. And that's certainly something I hope that everybody thinks about.
Agreed. Everyone, thank you for joining. Like I said, Al will talk in a minute. Everyone say bye-bye to Dashi. Bye-bye, Dashi. Maybe I'll get a collectible of Dashi at some point.